Hey everybody, and welcome back to Standby for Adventure. This is John. Thank you for joining me today. Guess what? I recorded this earlier, and for whatever random reason, no reason, because I didn't change anything, my microphone didn't pick up any sound. So if you saw this video appear yesterday in your feed and then it wasn't there, that's because I posted it and somebody said, "Hey, I'm not getting any sound," and I said, "Darn it." Um, there you go. But now I am re-recording this and we'll put it up. And what I wanted to do was go through Mordenkainen's Presents Monsters of the Multiverse, this here book right here. And it is coming out in the not annoyingly packaged in a 3-book box for $150 or whatever ridiculous price it was that thankfully I got a discount on. And if you have not yet picked it up, first off, I'll just say you should pick it up. It's if you're a DM for D&D and you're looking for more monsters, it is absolutely worth it. There, you don't have to watch the rest of the video. If you want to watch the rest of the video, great. I'm going to run through what's in the book. I'm going to try and go as quickly as possible. I know the video I recorded last was about an hour long, and I think I might shorten it a little bit because that was very, very long. There's 3 chapters to this book. I'm just going to jump right in. We're not going to do THACO Thursday because I don't know if this is going to go up on Thursday. But we're going to talk about Monsters of the Multiverse, so if you're still on the fence and you want to see what's in here using the actual book, I have the book here. Obviously, I'm currently on the page right here that you are seeing on this beautiful screen. I'm on the Wizards of the Coast website as well. Has a little bit of information about it, not too awful much. I did also find a page that lists all of the monsters that are in the book. I will put that down in the comments, so take a look at that if you want to know specifically what's in the book, or you can Google search it because I know that's out there as well. This book is due to come out on Monday, so this video probably isn't going to be too super useful unless you haven't picked it up right away, or you are new to D&D and just finding out about this book now and are curious about what it's all about. There is some other information on the Wizards of the Coast website. There's some interviews between Todd Kenrick and Jeremy Crawford. I don't know why that name slipped my mind. And they have lots of good things to say. I watched those sort of as they were coming out. And there's not a whole heck of a lot of information in print about it on the website. So let's go to the source, this book right here. I'm sure the physical version of the book is going to look a little different than the 2 that have already come out. At least I would assume. This has a slightly metallic-y look to the cover. And the other one, I think, also looks very different. I think it's white, actually, which I would not want. But it's the collector's edition. It'll probably be worth more money. So if you're looking at it as an investment, get the white collector box version and put it away. And then spend even more money and get the regular version of the book. What's in here? There are 3 chapters. And it dives right in. There's not a lot of introductory material. It pretty much just goes, here's what's here. The table of contents itself lists 33 new player character races, which are amazing. You don't have to use all of them, obviously. These are all just options to use. I've had games that I've run in the past, and again, anytime I'm going to do a book like this, or talk about a book like this, I'm going to offer suggestions on ways to use them, because they don't really offer that information in the books themselves. So this book has 33 different races, new races and races taken from books that have been published previously, and they've been updated with some information to behave the way they want those races to now. And there have been some significant changes. They've changed the lore of some races, like the goblins, hobgoblins, bugbears. They've changed the abilities of those races. They've changed even, let's see, the Harengon is in here, which was just printed in the Wild Beyond the Witchlight book. But if you don't have that adventure and you still want that race, this is the book to get to have that information. I'm not a big fan. I don't hate it, but I'm not a big fan of having so many races that you can play as player characters that are in a book that really the bulk of it is for the GM. So if you're a player and you want to play one of these more unusual races, or whatever race is in here that you're interested in, it seems kind of icky to have to pick that up. Maybe D&D Beyond will make it easier to pick up piecemeal the different races so that you don't have to buy the whole book, but I'm highly skeptical that they would bother doing that. So something to be aware of if you're interested in it as a player. Maybe crib off of your DM if they're going to have the book, and you can just take your pick of the races and use the information. Or like I said, if you're already in D&D Beyond and somebody has the book, then you're set. What's crazy is these 33 races that are in the book are in addition to all the other races. So we've got something like 50 different player character races that you can play in D&D. This is a huge increase from first, second, third edition. Fourth edition started to have a few more, and third edition also had more, but they had things like level adjustments that it was a really kludgy sort of thing where it's like, oh, I want to play a drow. Well, you can't play a drow because we're playing a first level game, and you have to be at least, I don't remember the specifics, at least third or fourth level to be a drow because it has a level adjustment. And there were all sorts of different races that you could do that had adjustments like that. Obviously, an ogre is much more powerful, is much tougher than a first level character. And so if you wanted to play an ogre character, it doesn't really fit that would be a first level character because it'd have so many hit points and etc. etc. And so instead of doing it that way, they've introduced races that might be able to, that do have really unique and interesting special abilities and racial traits and things like that make them stand out from all the other races. And I honestly think almost all of the races now really do have something very unique about them and will appeal to a very wide range of players, especially new players that have come into the game within the last few years and could have come from anywhere, right? They could have come from seeing their friends play D&D. They could have seen any of the streaming shows like Critical Role or Glass Cannon Network, things like that. They could have come in via anime. They could have come in via My Hero Academia, which I guess is anime, but it's a superhero thing, so I think of it as differently. They could have come in from any of the movies that are out there right now that have been popular. They maybe grew up with Lord of the Rings, and now they're old enough that they want to get into D&D. They'd be really old enough to get into D&D. But people can come from anywhere to get into the hobby, and so including races like, and I'll run through the list here, the races in this book include the Aarakocra, which is a flying bird people. There are a couple of races now that have flight. One thing I would say, if you're a new GM, I would caution against letting your players have flight because it literally introduces a whole nother dimension to what you have to keep track of as a GM. And it also sort of eliminates a lot of different challenges you can throw at your players that flight just gets around. Pits and an outbridge, a bridge that is gone, or a raging river. Oh, I'll just have my Aarakocra fly everybody across one at a time, and then that's not even an encounter. No big deal. You may not want that in your game, and that is perfectly acceptable. That is fine. Giving a first level character the ability to fly is effectively giving them a permanent third level spell, the fly spell. And it is very powerful in a sort of non-combat way, and it can also be very powerful in combat if it's given to somebody like a sorcerer or a wizard who can just stay far, far away and blast away without ever being in any danger of being hurt. So that was about the Aarakocra and flight. The other races, the Aasimar, which is sort of half celestial or partially godlike beings, certainly great for games where you want to be playing, a demigod or somebody who has some sort of celestial blood or otherworldly connection to the powerful beings. And they have resistance to necrotic and to radiant, which is super rare. Very, very interesting. And there are other options that you can choose for them. Bugbears. I love the bugbears. Love, love, love the bugbears. Always have. I like the change to the lore that they are now originated in Fairy, like the Shadowfell or the Feywild. And that gives them really a more interesting background for goblins, bugbears, and hobgoblins. But it also allowed them to then modify what those races did in the game themselves. So now bugbears are not only big and super sneaky, which I think is automatically a very cool thing for them to be, but they also have the ability to, like, they have long limbs. So if they need to, they can stand back 5 feet from whoever they're attacking and still attack and not be within the threatened range of someone else. Now, the way the rule is written for that is specifically that when the bugbear attacks, it can have a 5-foot longer reach than it normally would. So it does not affect things like taking an opportunity attack, so you don't threaten a longer area. You still only threaten 5 feet, but you can actually stand back a square further than anybody else and still get your attacks in. Super useful if you have other people in combat with an opponent that you want to attack. Super useful for somebody like a rogue or a monk to be able to move around the battlefield super quickly without needing to disengage. It's a fantastic race for one of those classes. Absolutely, I totally love it. And they also have this weird kind of stretchiness to them that almost makes them feel like superhero-y to me, because they can squeeze themselves down to fit through really small spaces without it causing them to slow down or be incapacitated in any way. Very, very interesting. The bugbear you should certainly look at. Centaur is another new race. They've had these previously. I think they had listed them in the Theros book, which was one of the Magic the Gathering books that they released. Although this version is a little bit different. I think the other version was large, and these guys are medium. They also have... they are able to climb ladders and things like that, so they left that in. It takes them a long time, obviously, but I can understand why they have that rule there, so that, you know, your character isn't just like, oh, see ya, you're a centaur, you can't come in the mine with us because we gotta climb down ladders and things like that. So that's fine. It's a little goofy, but whatever. But the centaur is very cool. I had a friend who played a centaur for a while in the game, and it was good. The changeling, which they have done, I think, very little work on, and it does, however, have the very coolest piece of artwork that I will find. It really is a neat piece of art. I just think it's a very different sort of style, and it looks very superhero-y, actually. There you go. This is the art. I think it is so frickin' cool looking, and it makes me want to play a changeling. There you go. That's the best thing a piece of art can do. There is the Deep Gnome, or the Svirfneblin. There is the Duergar, or the Deep Dwarf. Eladrin are in here as an official race, which was originally presented actually as an example race in the Dungeon Master's Guide of how to create a new race, but here they actually have them, and you get to pick between having an Eladrin who is from the autumn, winter, spring, or summer court, I'll say. I'm not sure if that's actually accurate. There are the fairy, who can be small, rather are small. I thought they could be either small or medium. They also have a flying speed. They start with some magical abilities that they are able to use, and they don't get much beyond that because having magic and the ability to fly are both really, really good. Like, no adjustments to stats, no anything. Very, very cool. I say no adjustment to stats, but did they do away with those entirely? I'm not 100% sure. Then there's the Furbolg, who is sort of a cow man made popular by Taliesin in the second, not episode, second campaign of Critical Role, and they're kind of big, very much fit with the druid archetype of character class, but they're big, strong, have strong connection to magic, or to nature, and can speak to animals and plants, which is kind of interesting. The Genasi, who are the genie-like characters that are affiliated with the different classic four elements, earth, air, fire, and water, and they have traits based on all of those, so if you wanted to play somebody who is like an elemental type, that would be very cool, and very possible. The Githyanki and Githzerai, two races that are absolutely fantastic, so much lore and cool stuff about them. Really excellent additions to the game, especially considering we're going to be getting Spelljammer coming soon. You're going to see a lot of Githyanki and Githzerai characters. Goblins! We have an official write-up for a goblin race, which is fantastic. I love it. The Goliath is in here, which was previously printed in a different book as well. The Harengon, which, as I said previously about the fairy, was also printed in Wild Beyond the Witchlight. Harengon are great. Sort of the idea was to create a race based on the little rabbits that scribes used to put in the margins of illuminated manuscripts way back in the past. And all I know is now you could play Usagi Yojimbo, and if you don't know who that is, you should go find Usagi Yojimbo. It means Rabbit Bodyguard, by Stan Sakai. There's a new cartoon out. It's a very kiddie cartoon, but it's the comic book itself is absolutely amazing, and there's so much great historical stuff in there. I'm not a big Asian culture person, like I don't get into it that much, but Usagi Yojimbo is exactly at the right level of information for me, because he does explain things and it's always super interesting. And if, like I said, if you haven't checked it out, check it out. There's the Hobgoblin, which has again, they have some Fey gifts, which is different than previously. They have either hospitality, passage, or spite, or fortune from the many. So this Fey gift is you can use this trait to take the help action as a bonus action, and you can do so a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. You regain all expended uses. Sorry, I'm off kilter here in the camera. You regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. Starting at 3rd level, choose one of the options below each time you take the help action with this trait. So, those other abilities are what I just said: hospitality, passage, and spite. Hospitality is you and the creature you help each gain a number of temporary hit points equal to 1d6 plus your proficiency bonus. That could be pretty significant. Passage, you and the creature you help each increase your walking speed by 10 feet until the end of your next turn. And spite, until the start of your next turn, the first time the creature you help hits a target with an attack roll, the target has disadvantage on the next attack roll it makes within the next minute. And this Fortune of the Many is a completely separate ability. So again, if you're looking for really a good support character of any kind, the Hobgoblin is fantastic, and they do have great abilities otherwise too. So there's the Kenku, which is the kind of bird creature mimic, very, very interesting sort of race. Kobolds, lizard folk. I've always loved lizard folk as player characters ever since the old AD&D Rogues Gallery that presented a bunch of different characters, and one of the characters was a lizard folk, and I was like, how do you play a lizard man in D&D? Oh my god, that's awesome! But it was because the character had been killed and reincarnated, and they came back as a lizard man. Minotaur, very, very cool. Also, really, really cool ability with their Labyrinthine Recall. You always know which direction is north, and you have advantage on wisdom survival checks when that you make to navigate or track. So, man, talk about a cool Minotaur Ranger or Minotaur ship's captain, anything like that. Like, you would, it's just such a cool idea. There is the Full-Blooded Orc, thankfully doing away with the half-orc, which still exists, obviously, from the player's handbook, but now you could actually play an orc, because orcs don't have to be evil. They can actually just be, you know, like anybody else, considering they're an intelligent race in D&D, and are not, you know, birthed from darkness and death like they were in the Lord of the Rings. Even if that's where the inspiration originally came from, it doesn't have to stay that way. The Satyr, kind of a cool race, especially if you came into gaming and your love of fantasy from something like the Narnia books with Mr. Tumnus. You could play a character like that. A Sea Elf, always nice to have aquatic characters if you are, on the water or just think it sounds like something fun. The Shatter Kai. So the Shatter Kai are a fairly not a particularly well-known race, but I would describe them sort of as elves that they're not drow, but they are elves that are more closely associated with the Shadowfell. So drow are really associated with the Underdark, or whatever it's called in your game or in the setting that you're using. Shatter Kai are elf shadow ninjas, is kind of the way to say it, and they are super, super cool. The Shifter is in here as well from the Eberron setting. Tabaxi are included. The Turtle, so you can play a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle if you want. A Triton, which is originally, they come from the elemental plane of water and have a lot of things that are very similar to the aquatic elf, but they are much more specifically tied to that elemental aspect of water. And then the Yuan-Ti. And the Yuan-Ti, I mean, come on. Just how freaking cool does that look? I also think it's cool that this piece of artwork and a few others in this book, a number of others in this book, were actually taken from Magic the Gathering cards, because they've finally started to kind of cross the streams there, and they have fantastic art for Magic, so why not reuse it in D&D, especially if it applies? I don't mind that at all. I think it's an absolutely smart use of the resources they have, and it looks amazing. I mean, the art is all fantastic. Now, the book itself, it says here just in the first line, this bestiary provides game statistics and lore for more than 250 monsters, which are suitable for any D&D campaign. That is very much true. The monster manual itself, which I have right here, is 352 pages of creatures, so definitely more than 240 monsters, whereas this is 288 pages, so a little bit less, but whereas the monster manual is going to include all of the stuff that you've been using in your games for years and years and years and years and years and years and years, Monsters of the Multiverse is going to update some of those, but also introduce so many really fantastic new staples. Things like the Duergar, and there's 5 or 6 different types of Duergar. Things like the Drow, and there's a few different types of Drow. There's new kobolds, there's new ogres, there's different hobgoblins are included in here. So they really have kind of gone out of their way to make sure to include things that any GM will be able to use, because these are creatures that are going to be in your game world. They also have things that are even more staple than the monsters, which are other NPCs like an archer or an archdruid or a bunch of different types of wizards at various different challenge ratings, including an apprentice wizard. There's a war priest, there's a champion. So all these characters, all these humanoids that your characters could interact with in the city. So if you need to have, like, they challenge, the great fighter who just finished a fight in a gladiatorial pit, just use the champion write-up for that, and it would be appropriate. Or if someone calls them out and challenges them in the street, maybe use the champion for that, or use somebody else, whatever other write-up you want to use. They have things like there is a bard write-up, which I've already used in my Eberron game that I'm running, as an NPC for the characters to interact with. There's so many very, very useful low-level and not weird creatures that are going to require you to come up with some reason for them to be there, right? They could just be there in the city. But then they do go a little more further afield to include somewhat more unusual monsters, and then really unusual monsters, including a bunch of monsters that are going to be absolutely perfect for inclusion in games set in, say, Spelljammer or Eberron or whatever other setting that they happen to come out with, because there's tons of stuff in here. They could even use, so many of these creatures could be used in like a sigil, the Blood War, what am I trying to say? Planescape. So if Planescape comes out, there's the Abishai, which is the first creature in this book, are the Abishai. There's the green Abishai, black Abishai, red Abishai, white Abishai, and they all get write-ups. Then there's the Alhoon, who is sort of an undead Mind Flayer. So if the regular Mind Flayer wasn't enough of a challenge, now it's undead. The Alkilith, the Allip, which I don't understand the Allip, but I want to understand it because it's really kind of a cool monster. And I'm not going to read through all of these because the list is right down below, I guess right over here. So take a look at that, but there's a new Hag included here. There's the Archdruid and the Archer, the Astral Deadnought, which you can see right here, made a guest appearance in the second campaign of Critical Role. Thought that was a very interesting use of that creature. There's also going to be, speaking of which, I need to open a file here to show you guys. There's going to be a huge miniature based on the Astral Deadnought, coming, I think, from WizKids. They do all the minis for those guys now. And let me find what I was looking for. Spelljammer, here we go. So I'm going to show off some minis here, and why don't I do that now for everybody who's still stuck around. These are some minis I found online just today, or I guess yesterday when you're watching this, and going to be coming from WizKids, licensed obviously from Wizards of the Coast, and this is stuff that's coming from Spelljammer, and you will see some things in here that may inspire you to get super interested in the Spelljammer setting. And so here we see the Flying Fish, an Asteroid, the Night Spider, which is, these are all different types of ships or celestial bodies for the asteroids, and the Nautiloid. I think this is for a ship scale combat game. Adult Red Dragon, a swarm of murder comets, Tyrant Ship, and a Cosmic Horror, which does in fact look like a horrific thing. Space Galleon, a Bombard, a Squid Ship, an Ancient Gold Dragon, a Strike Ship, and it's going to be pretty cool because if these are smallish figures, these could be a lot of fun for simulating battles at sea, and then you could have your boat or your flying ship on the map and have a battle map of the layout of the boat, but also have something going on combat-wise for the ship itself, which is super interesting. Turtle Ship, a Scorpion, the Astral Deadnought, which, again, even as a small miniature, if that's a small miniature, it's probably a pretty good size. A Lamprey, the Giant Gelatinous Cube, Hammerhead, an Aesthetic, that's interesting. A couple of different types of asteroids included here, a Megapede, a Wasp, and a living ship with a tree on it, which is kind of cool. Star Moth, Ancient Solar Dragon, Ancient Lunar Dragon, and a Damselfly. So just some things to check out. They are not in this book, but I was talking about Spelljammer, so I thought I'd bring them up. There are Demons and Devils. One of the things that they did in this book, instead of grouping things under Demon, Devil, Dragon, they alphabetized them all by the creature's actual names. So, for instance, the Babau, right there, the Babau is listed under B as opposed to under Fiend or Demon. So you will need to know the names of the monsters as opposed to the type of the monster. The only time that isn't really true is if it's a actual race that has a bunch of different write-ups. So if you are talking about For instance, the ogres have 3 or 4 or 5 different types of ogres in this, or trolls, there are 3 or 4 different types of trolls, kobolds, that sort of thing. The Duergar, the dwarves, those are all going to be listed under the beginning of their race name. The book also includes archdevils and archfiends, which is pretty cool. So if you end up going to hell or want to be inspired by the history and the background that they give for those characters to maybe give you some ideas for your game, that stuff's included, and then maybe your characters are going to be powerful enough eventually where they could actually take on somebody like Baphomet. The Banderhobb is in here. There's the Bard, Barghest, Berbalang, another type of hag, so that's 2 new hags in here. A Blackguard, which is kind of a cool evil paladin-y sort of character, but again, easy thing to drop into a city setting, bad guy working for one of your other bad guys. The Bodak, the Boggle, the Bulezau, the Boneclaw, Cadaver Collector, Canaloth, Catoplepaz, which I never get tired of that word because it's a crazy, crazy word. Then there's a bunch of different types of cattle, which they broke their rule here again, so cattle are all listed under the term cattle, and include things like the Aurochs, the Deep Rothay, which is a creature from the Underdark, Ox and Stench Cow. Then we have the Cave Fisher, always a really weird monster, but you know what? It can be a challenge and a different sort of encounter for players to have to deal with, so I don't mind the inclusion. There's the Champion, a Chitin. Those guys are cool. I haven't seen them in a while. I'm sure they were in 3rd edition. I'm not sure if they appeared in 4th edition, but they may have. A new write-up for the Choker. Another just fantastic monster that's been introduced in the last decade and a half, I want to say. Really like the Choker. Choldrith. A bunch of new Clockworks. There's a Clockwork Bronze Scout, Clockwork Iron Cobra, Clockwork Oaken Bolter, and Clockwork Stone Defender. And I'm sorry, but these guys are just super, super cool looking, and I really want to have them fight the characters in my Eberron game, and that's probably going to happen. Cloud Giant, Cranium Rep, Corpse Flower, Darklings. Always like Darklings. I think they're a very underused race that is very, very cool and mysterious and funky and kind of creepy and just really neat. Death Kiss, which is a weird sort of semi-beholder that came into existence in a not in a way other than would normally create an actual beholder. This is like some weird mutated version of a beholder. The Deathlocks, and the Deathlocks I think are very interesting because they're basically undead warlocks. And I am totally into this because I love the Warlock. I wrote a whole book on Warlocks, which is on Drive-Thru RPG, the Warlock's Book of Secrets. Please go buy a copy. It is actually a very good book, and I say that even though I wrote it, and I almost never say that about stuff that I write, but there's just so many different cool options in there. But the Deathlocks are very, very cool, and also, I mean, the art looks pretty darn neat. And you could see that being, a good bad guy to confront your characters. The Deep Scion, which also made an appearance in the 2nd campaign of Critical Role, and looks like a weird predator squid monster thing. I don't know. Demigorgon, the Derro, Devourer, Durgaloth, some dinosaurs. So the dinosaurs include, you can look down below, but it does very much include the Velociraptor, Stegosaurus, Quetzalcoatlus, which I thought was an interesting inclusion. A couple of different types of dolphins, one of which is magical. A bunch of different types of drow. The drow Arcanomancer, or rather Arachnomancer, Favored Consort, House Captain, Inquisitor, the drow Matron Mother, drow Shadowblade. So if you're looking for drow for an Underdark campaign, or if they exist in your setting in some other way, there are a ton of drow in here that'll fit into a bunch of different challenge ratings in the game. Duergar, same thing. There's a Duergar Despot, a Duergar Cavalrachni. I think it's some sort of what does this say? Cavalrachni are Duergar cavalry trained to fight while riding female steeders, which are also in this book, and they're big kind of spider creatures, or other Underdark creatures as mounts. Okay, that's interesting. Duergar Mindmaster, Duergar Soulblade, Duergar Stoneguard, Duergar Warlord, Duergar Zororn. Oh, that's the Zerorn? Zerorn. That's the alchemist type. Duergar Hammerer, Duergar Screamer. The Dybbuk. I am a big fan of the Dybbuk, and I didn't know that's what this creature was called, but it's a dead body that's been possessed by a demon, and the demon can do some really twisted stuff with the body that's very gross and disgusting, and is perfect for a horror game, especially like a body horror game where, you know, you encounter something that's super disturbing and gross, and make sure your characters or your players are okay with it. But such a cool monster, and I'm absolutely using it as many times as I can in my game. Eidolon and a Sacred Statue. You probably recognize the art for this off of the old Player's Handbook. Is that right? Yeah, it was the Player's Handbook. The statue of Moloch. Then there are sample Eladrin creatures. So if you have one as a player character, that's fine. There's also some in here written up as adversaries or allies, however you want to use them. They are all challenge rating 10, so they're not wussy, and looks pretty interesting. The Elder Brain, and there's a nice map of a strangely constructed Mind Flayer and Mind Flayer colony, I guess is what they call it here. Nest, I don't know. And it doesn't look like very fun to explore around in. An Elder Tempest must be some sort of weird elemental creature. Yes, it is. A bunch of new elementals, and I will show these off because I think they are very cool. The ones in the in the monster manual were challenge rating 3 or 4, I think, and all of these are challenge rating 7. So if you were looking for a more robust, a tougher elemental to take on some higher level characters, they're included here, which I think is a fantastic idea. The art updates for these I think are a little weird. I don't really care for the like armor that they're wearing. I think it looks cool, but they could just be more powerful elementals and look like the other elementals, and I would have been fine with that. Fire Giant Dreadnought, Fire Newt, Flind, a Flail Snail, and come on, for as stupid as the Flail Snail is, that's actually kind of a freaky, weird, awesome piece of artwork. I really like this book. As I said in the beginning, absolutely worth picking up. Let's see, the Flind, Frogamoth, the Frost Giant Everlasting One, a Frost Salamander, a Gouth, who is like a beholder. The Gazer, which is a very tiny little beholder. The Geryon. Geryon is locked in a new struggle with Levistus for control of Stygia. So Geryon must be a devil. Is he an archdevil, though? Anyway, so it does include things like that. The Gith, who are the hippo people from the Spelljammer setting, so that's a good thing to include. The Giralon, which is the four-armed white ape. Always thought they were cool. Some sample Githyanki and Githzerai. Some gnolls, including a gnoll Fleshnar, a gnoll Hunter, and a gnoll Witherling, which is an undead gnoll. The Grey Render. The Grey Render also appeared in Season 1 of Critical Role as a monster wandering in the forests. Grazit, who is another demon. The Grungs, cute little poisonous frog creatures. Should be fun for lower level characters, for people exploring the swamps, all that sort of stuff. It's just a new, different type of foe to fight, and I also really like that they could be kind of cute and helpful, and they could be evil and hurtful, and it's very, very cool, because they could be any alignment. So you could run into a good group of them, kind of like frog hobbits. They've reintroduced the Guard Drakes. I always really liked the Guard Drakes because it made for a nice low-level dragon encounter. And they are dragons, but they're very much sort of a bestial type of dragon. some Hobgoblins, Hobgoblin Devastator, Hobgoblin Iron Shadow, the Howler, which I think is another absolutely creepy piece of artwork. Way creepier than the old versions of the Howler. Let's see here. Juiblex, a Chiron, Kobold Dragon Shield, Kobold Inventor, Kobold Scale Sorcerer, a Kored, the Kraken Priest, Kruthix. I love Kruthix. Kruthix are another fantastic new low-level monster. Not new, but they're presented here, and I think they were in another book, but they have been updated for this. And it includes a young Kruthix, an adult Kruthix, and the Kruthix Hive Lord. Very, very cool. My players in my Eberron game somehow found their way between some of the walls of the towers of Eberron and found out that this particular area they were in had a big Kruthix infestation, which nobody is aware of and they haven't done anything about. So we'll see if that turns into something. Lucrata, Leviathan, Martial Arts Adept. Pretty cool. Marut, Master Thief, also very cool. Effectively like a 13th level thief character. Only challenge rating 5 because that's how it works out. But if you need somebody to be a thief, NPC-wise, this is a fantastic write-up for that. Some sort of weird ghoul thing. Moreji? That is not a friendly-looking creature. And challenge rating 7, yeah, that's tough. Maw Demon the Measle, which are these little, I guess they're not little, they are medium-sized. Malicious hermits who fled to the Shadowfell to escape their mortal existence and contemplate their misery. I could have that job. Let's see here, the Meanlock, the Maragon, which is a weird-looking baby-faced devil creature. Very odd. Mind Witness, which is also an aberration like the Beholders. Moloch gets a write-up, and you can see there's the statue of Moloch from the Old Player's Handbook. The Morkoth. This made actually a super interesting appearance in the Campaign 2 of Critical Role, and I was super impressed with how he used the Morkoth in there, because I've looked at the Morkoth as a monster for years and years and years and years, and always thought, what a weird monster. And I thought Matt's use of it was really creative and interesting and very, very cool. Mouth of Grolantor. There's actually a mini for this that I saw just the other day at the store. Nabasu, a Nagpa. That looks just like a Skeksis from the Dark Crystal. And I think are really kind of similar and suitably creepy. Neogi. Oh, I love the Neogi. Such an absolutely creepy, alien, weird creature. They're slavers and they control minds and they're all about dominating people and they're just absolutely evil, 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 and I think they are an awesome bad guy. In fact, they have made an appearance also in my Eberron game. Neolithid, Nightwalker, a Nilbog, Oblexes, Adult Oblex, Elder Oblex, Ogre of War, Ogres of War, rather. So this is in addition to the Ogre in the Monster Manual. Now we have an Ogre Battering Ram, an Ogre Bolt Launcher, an Ogre Chain Brute, an Ogre Howdah, which is kind of cool. So they carry people on their back and basically are like a walking, kind of like a mech, really. A walking firing platform. Orcus is in here. Orthon, a Quickling, the Phoenix, Redcaps. So happy to see the Redcap included because it's been a favorite fairy creature adversary of mine ever since the original Mage comics from Matt Wagner back in the 80s. And if you haven't read the Mage comics from Matt Wagner, go check them out, especially the first series. Absolutely fantastic. The Retriever, Rudderkin, Seaspawn, Gloomweavers. These are Shatter Kai. Shatter Kai Gloomweaver, Shatter Kai Shadow Dancer, Shatter Kai Soulmonger, Shadow Mastiff Alpha. A Shusuva, which is a weird demon creature. Kind of looks like a scorpion-tailed winter wolf, dire wolf thing. Very, very funky creature. I think I'm showing the picture. Yes, right there. We're in the S's. We're almost done. Skulks. Slithering Tracker, a Skull Lord, Sorrowsworn. I gotta read up on those. Spawn of Kios, Starspawn Gru, Starspawn Hulk, Starspawn Larva Mage, Starspawn Mangler, Starspawn Seer. Oh, here are the Steeders. So these are the things that the Duragar cavalry ride around on. Yes, they are creepy-looking tick spider creatures, and you can kind of see there's a Duragar right there. This is not the creature's head. This is the Duragar piloting or riding the creature, which has big teeth, nasty teeth. Steel Predator, Stone Cursed. These guys are cool. Stone Cursed are, in fact, people who have been turned to stone by a Flesh to Stone or by a petrification spell or Gorgon's ability or Medusa, and they have been the statues that have been left behind are treated in some way with some magical process that has awakened a portion of the spirit of the person inside, and they sort of are like undead zombie statues, which I think is so cool. Stone Giants, a couple different types. Swarm of Rot Grub, an absolutely terribly designed monster that will just kill your characters, and I hate that sort of thing, so I will never use a Rot Grub. Swashbuckler, a Sword Wraith Commander, and a Sword Wraith Warrior. So cool looking. It just gives this great sense of like ominous danger and creepy. It's really a neat picture. Let's see, a Tanaruk, Titavilis, which is a demon or a devil. Tlankali. I don't know what these are. Also called Scorpion Folk. Oh, well, they are very large scorpion folk. And they are, in fact, large according to the game. That I do not want to run into that. Tortles. So there is a Tortle Civilian. So just a challenge rating 1 quarter. And there's a Tortle Druid, challenge rating 2. So there's some options there. The Trapper finally makes an appearance, which is a big flat monster that I think goes on the ceiling and drops down on you and encases you or like wraps around you and tries to kill you. Trolls. There is a Dire Troll, Rot Troll, Spirit Troll, Venom Troll, and Ulitharid. There, I can talk. Vampiric Mist, a Vargoyle, Veggie Pygmies, which were originally created for inclusion with the Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. So this kind of makes me wonder if we might see an Expedition to the Barrier Peaks adventure at some point. Especially they could tie it in with Spelljammer, so you could run it either in Spelljammer or run it in regular D&D. The War Priest, Warlock of the Archfey, Warlock of the Fiend, Warlock of the Great Old One. There's a Warlord, there's a Westrolith, Wizards, Apprentice Wizard, Wizard, Abjurer Wizard, Conjurer Wizard, Diviner Wizard, Enchanter Wizard, Evoker Wizard, Illusionist Wizard, Necromancer Wizard, Transmuter Wizard, Woodwode, Zvarts, Yinohu, the demon god of Knowles, who I honestly think his name is a play off of the term you-know-who, and I will think that until I die. I don't care what anybody says. The Yethhound, Yonti Anathema, Yonti Broodguard. Oh, I'm so happy that Yonti are in here because it's also just a monstrous race that I think is fantastic and awesome. Yonti Mind Whisperer, Yonti Nightmare Speaker. And then the Yonti Pitmaster. I mean, come on. Look at how cool this guy looks. He reminds me of the... Why can't I get this facing straight on? He reminds me of the orc that kills Boromir, or whoever it is that dies in that one scene and gets shot through the chest in Lord of the Rings. Zariel, who is another devil. Zuggitmoy, the demon queen of molds. And then at the end of the book, the last chapter, are these lists of monsters by type. Super useful. It also lists alphabetically by type. It also lists their page number. There is also a list of all of the monsters alphabetically by their challenge rating. So starting with low challenge rating, going higher. Also with their page numbers. And then stat blocks for the monsters by their environment. So super, super useful chart here if you need to come up with random encounters, or if you want to customize random encounters, which was what I would really recommend, so that they actually play some part in your game instead of just actually being a random encounter, unless you need that sort of thing to kind of pad out the time. Some bandits attack. I always like to have random encounters. I either don't want to have random encounters because they just take up time, or I want the random encounter to somehow introduce a plot line or give the players some sort of information that can be useful somewhere else, or it somehow ties into what they are also doing anyway. And that is the whole book. It is fantastic. If you're on the fence, I say pick it up, especially after it comes out as of the 16th. And there you go. That is all I have to say about that. I am not going to do a THAC0 Thursday, because I'm not sure if I'm going to get it out on Thursday. And this was already long enough. So I hope that was useful. If you were curious about what's all in here and what sort of use you might get out of it, I know I've already gotten use out of this book. I've only had it maybe a month, and I'm sure I'm going to use it a whole lot more, just because, well, not only just because, but certainly because none of my players are going to be familiar with most of these monsters. And that's really kind of the best thing ever. So there you go. That's everything for this week. Thanks very much. I'm sorry this is a little late, but I'll be much more careful about making sure everything's recorded properly in the future. And please do like, subscribe, and share. Please share this out to people if you would. I would definitely appreciate that, because I'm trying to build up more followers. I only have about 60 right now, and I'd like to get many, 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 many more. Have yourself a good rest of the day and a good weekend. Stand by for adventure.